Developing right now, the FBI raid of several lawmakers' homes and offices. Since then, House Speaker Cameron Sexton says 3 employees have been put on administrative leave.
A number of Detroit city government insiders are shocked by the raids carried out at the homes of Scott Benson and Janae Ayers. It's like, here we go again.
At 5:47 a.m. this morning, federal agents did something unprecedented in Minnesota history. They walked into the state capitol building in St. Paul, bypassed security with federal warrants, and arrested a sitting state legislator at his desk. His name was Marcus Reinhart, a 3-term representative who chaired the Public Safety Committee, the man responsible for writing the laws meant to fight drug trafficking, the man who approved budgets for law enforcement, the man who stood at press conferences promising to protect Minnesota families from the opioid crisis. That man was just indicted on 47 federal charges for running a $340 million cocaine distribution network that operated out of his legislative office for the past 6 years. But Marcus Reinhart wasn't arrested alone. By 9 a.m., federal agents had executed coordinated raids across 11 counties in Minnesota, arrested 89 individuals, seized over $87 million in cash, confiscated 2,400 kilograms of pure cocaine, and dismantled what prosecutors are calling the most politically protected drug network ever discovered in the upper Midwest. This is the story of how a state legislator turned government power into a cartel franchise, and how one encrypted hard drive left in a panic revealed a network so vast, so embedded in the system, that it took 8 months of covert investigation just to map it out. The raid on the Capitol wasn't the beginning, it was the end game. The investigation started last summer when a low-level cocaine dealer in South Minneapolis was arrested during a routine traffic stop. He was carrying 3 kilograms of product, standard street-level bust. But when DEA agents searched his phone, they found something that made them immediately escalate the case to the FBI. Text messages. Not from another dealer, from a phone number registered to the Minnesota State Legislature. The texts were coded but clear. Delivery schedules, payment confirmations, pickup locations, and a name that appeared over and over. Mr. Not initials for a cartel boss, initials for Marcus Reinhart. Federal investigators couldn't believe it. A sitting legislator communicating directly with street dealers? It didn't make sense. Legislators don't run street operations. They're too visible, too scrutinized. But the phone records didn't lie. Over the next 2 weeks, agents traced the number and discovered it wasn't Reinhart's personal phone. It was a burner device, but it was registered to a staffer in his office and used exclusively for what agents would later identify as operational logistics. The cocaine network had embedded itself inside the Minnesota state government. Surveillance began immediately. FBI teams monitored Reinhart's movements. They installed license plate readers near the Capitol. What they found confirmed everything. Every Monday and Thursday at 7:15 p.m., a black Chevy Suburban would pull into the Capitol parking garage. Same vehicle, same time. It parked on the lower level, stayed 12 minutes, then left. Security cameras showed Reinhart entering the back seat and emerging with a leather briefcase. The briefcase went straight to his office. And every Tuesday and Friday morning, a courier registered as a lobbyist would meet Reinhart's chief of staff, leave with that briefcase within 5 minutes. Agents knew what they were seeing. The Capitol building was being used as a distribution hub. Cocaine was coming in through the parking garage, being stored in a government office, and going out through the front door, disguised as legislative business. But knowing it and proving it were 2 different things. Federal agents couldn't just raid a sitting legislator without ironclad evidence, so they did something more patient. They followed the money. Financial teams dissected Reinhart's records. On paper, everything looked clean. $50,000 salary, modest campaign fund, middle-class home in Roseville. But deeper investigation found cracks. Reinhart owned North Star Policy Group, a consulting firm that received $14 million from shell companies with no operations. One Delaware company paid $6 million for transportation policy consulting, but had no employees, no office, just a bank account receiving wires from Mexico, Colombia, and Miami. The FBI set a trap. In September, undercover agents posing as Chicago buyers contacted mid-level dealers in Reinhardt's network. They wanted 50 kilograms monthly, high volume. Within a week, a logistics coordinator contacted them. The product was available, transported using state vehicles, disguised as government materials, delivered to secure locations. The coordinator's confidence made it clear this network believed it was untouchable. The undercover agents agreed. First shipment scheduled mid-October. Delivery location: a Bloomington warehouse leased to a re-entry nonprofit. On the surface, legitimate charity helping ex-inmates. In reality, a front receiving $2.1 million in state grants that Reinhardt personally sponsored. The warehouse supposedly stored donated furniture. Instead, it stored cocaine. On October 17th, undercover agents arrived. The coordinator opened a container labeled office supplies and pulled out 50 shrink-wrapped bricks stamped with a Sinaloa cartel logo. This wasn't local. Reinhardt's network was a cartel distribution arm. Agents completed the purchase but didn't arrest anyone. The FBI wanted everyone. That opportunity came 3 weeks later. An undercover agent requested a meeting with leadership to discuss expanding into Wisconsin and Iowa. The meeting was approved. Location: Reinhardt's office. November 8th, 6:30 p.m., after hours. The FBI wired the agent. That evening, he signed in as a lobbyist and was escorted to Reinhardt's third-floor office. Reinhardt was there, confident, calm. For 38 minutes, he laid out everything. How cocaine moved from Mexico to Texas to Minnesota, using state-contracted trucks with transportation permits his office authorized. How it was stored in nonprofits and community centers. How his Public Safety Committee position gave him access to law enforcement schedules and raid plans. Then, Reinhardt said the fatal words. "You want Wisconsin? I can make that happen. I have relationships with legislators there. We can build the same structure. No one touches us because we are the system." The recording was over. The FBI had everything they needed. The next morning, federal prosecutors filed for sealed indictments and arrest warrants. Over the next 2 months, agents worked in absolute secrecy to map out every property, every courier, every shell company, and every kilogram of cocaine moving through the network. By early February, the operation was ready. Over 300 federal agents were briefed. The plan was to hit every location simultaneously to prevent evidence from being destroyed. The target date was set, February 15th, this morning. At 4:30 a.m., tactical teams assembled in staging areas across the Twin Cities. The primary target was Reinhardt's office in the capital, but the raids extended far beyond. In South Minneapolis, agents hit an apartment complex where 6 mid-level dealers lived. In Bloomington, they stormed the nonprofit warehouse and found 340 kilograms of cocaine stored in crates marked as educational materials. In St. Cloud, they raided the youth sports complex and discovered a hidden room behind the locker area filled with cash counting machines, vacuum sealers, and $12 million in bundled bills. In Duluth, they arrested a courier at a truck stop who was carrying 80 kilograms of product in a vehicle with state government license plates. By 8 a.m., federal agents had seized enough cocaine to supply the entire state for 3 months. They had recovered $87 million in cash from 14 different locations. They had arrested 89 individuals, including Reinhardt's chief of staff, 3 legislative aides, 2 nonprofit directors, 7 logistics coordinators, and dozens of street-level dealers. But the most significant arrest happened at exactly 5:47 a.m., when FBI agents walked into Marcus Reinhardt's office, read him his rights, and placed him in handcuffs in front of the same desk where he had voted on criminal justice reform bills just 2 days earlier. The fallout was immediate. The Minnesota Legislature went into emergency session. The governor demanded a full investigation into how a sitting lawmaker could operate a drug network for 6 years without detection. Federal prosecutors announced that Reinhart faced 47 charges, including drug trafficking, racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, and using his public office to facilitate organized crime. If convicted on all counts, he could face life in prison. But the charges didn't stop with Reinhart. The indictments also named 2 other state officials who had taken bribes to approve contracts that funded the network's front organizations. One was a deputy commissioner at the Department of Human Services. The other was a senior analyst at the State Transportation Authority. Both had been on Reinhart's payroll through consulting fees disguised as policy work. If you're still watching this, you need to understand the scale of what just happened. This wasn't just a drug bust. This was the exposure of a legislator who weaponized government power to build a cartel distribution network. If you believe every politician involved in this should face maximum sentencing, hit that like button now so this story reaches the people who need to see it. The investigation also revealed how deep the corruption went. Reinhart didn't just use his office to move drugs. He actively sabotaged law enforcement efforts to stop his own network. Agents found emails showing that Reinhart had received confidential briefings on DEA operations targeting drug trafficking in Minneapolis. Within 24 hours of those briefings, dealers in his network received warnings to move product out of areas about to be raided. In one case, a planned DEA bust on a stash house in North Minneapolis was called off at the last minute because the house was empty. Records later showed that Reinhart had attended a public safety briefing where that operation was discussed. 2 hours later, his chief of staff sent an encrypted message to a dealer telling him to relocate immediately. This is what corruption looks like when it captures the system. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It operates behind closed doors, in encrypted apps, using the legitimacy of government to shield criminal enterprise. Reinhart sat in committee hearings and voted to increase penalties for drug crimes while running one of the largest cocaine networks in the state. He gave speeches about protecting children from addiction while profiting from the very poison destroying families. And he did it with the confidence of a man who believed his position made him invincible. But the network's downfall also exposed a troubling reality. How does a state legislator run a $340 million cocaine operation for 6 years without anyone noticing? The answer is that people did notice. Lower-level staffers raised concerns about Reinhart's unexplained wealth. Legislative researchers questioned why his consulting firm was receiving millions from unknown companies. One former aide even filed a complaint with the State Ethics Board, alleging that Reinhart was using his office for personal profit. That complaint was dismissed as unsubstantiated. The aide was reassigned to a different department, and Reinhart continued operating unchecked. The system failed because the system was designed to trust its own. Legislators police themselves. Ethics investigations are handled internally. Financial disclosures are reviewed by colleagues who have no incentive to dig too deep. Reinhart exploited every gap in that oversight structure. He knew the rules because he helped write them. He knew the loopholes because he had spent years finding them. And he knew that as long as he maintained the appearance of legitimacy, no one would ask the hard questions. The human cost of Reinhart's network is still being calculated. The 2,400 kilograms of cocaine seized in these raids represent millions of individual doses that would have been sold on streets across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Every dose is a potential overdose. Every overdose is a family destroyed. Every family destroyed is a community weakened. The money Reinhart made didn't come from thin air. It came from addiction, from desperation, from people who bought poison because they couldn't escape the cycle. And while Reinhart sat in his office drafting legislation, people were dying from the product his network distributed. Federal prosecutors are now tracing the financial network to determine where all the money went. Preliminary findings show that Reinhardt owned properties in Arizona, Florida, and the Cayman Islands, all purchased through shell companies. He had offshore accounts holding an estimated $40 million. He owned luxury vehicles registered to fake consulting firms, and he had been planning to retire from the legislature next year, well before anyone could connect the dots. But the encrypted hard drive found in his office during the raid contained the full financial history of the network. Every transaction, every shipment, every bribe. The evidence is overwhelming. Comment exposed if you believe every legislator who enabled this network should be investigated and charged. Let people know that corruption doesn't just happen in back alleys. It happens in Capitol buildings. And remember, this is a fictional dramatization, but the systems it exposes, the tactics it describes, and the corruption it reveals are happening in real legislatures, in real states, right now. This is Military Command. We will keep digging, we will keep exposing, and we will not let power hide behind government titles.